Hello and welcome again to Sport Unlocked, the podcast giving you the lowdown on the week's sports news. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press, and quite rarely alongside me actually in person are Martin Ziegler from The Times.
Great to be with you guys.
And Tarek Panja from the New York Times.
Good to be with you guys.
And we're all together because we've been at the Premier League meeting, the quarterly gathering of all the club executives, and there's a bit of intriguing news from there to come.
Yeah, some huge TV news and some very nice coffee while waiting all day in the hotel for the executives to emerge from this very lengthy meeting.
We'll tell you how we help the Premier League comply with net zero. Also coming up, we've got news from the Beijing Olympics and a Russian doping scandal, as perhaps not too surprising. News from the world of World Cup bidding and a big name that's out of contention for 2030. The power plays in European football have given the clubs more control of the finances. We'll tell you why. A big name is out at Barcelona. Just why has the CEO resigned? And so much more, including the cat that's caused huge controversy in English football. But we start with the Premier League meeting we've been gathering at. Great to see all the club executives in person, some choosing to speak, some not wanting to speak, and some actually reveal themselves as fans of the pod, Tarek.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were Premier League figures. Nice to have some good words from the Chief Executive of the Football Association, Mark Bullingham, fresh from a trip to the Middle East, Rob.
Yeah, he was at the Club World Cup in Abu Dhabi. And Martin, your jacket got a bit of attention at the Premier League meeting.
Yeah, met the new FA chairwoman, Debbie Hewitt. It turns out she is also the chairs of some other companies, including the brand White Stuff. And it just so happened I was wearing a new blazer from White Stuff, so I've already made a very distinct impression.
Yeah, that isn't a sponsorship plug here. There's no code we're going to give you like some podcast to get a discount.
Felt a bit like teacher's pet, if I'm honest, Martin. There was a hint of pre-planning. You insist there wasn't, but, time will tell.
But there was some interesting financial news in that meeting, and some club chiefs were really delighted to discover the news of just how much cash they're going to be earning. For the first time in the 30-year history of the Premier League, they're going to be earning more revenue from overseas than from domestic TV deals.
Yeah, this is a day that's been coming for quite some time. So the total is going to be 10.5 billion over the next 3 years, and 5.3 billion of that will be overseas deals, 5.1 domestic. I think it's quite a it's a significant moment because it does mean that the clubs are going to come under increased pressure to prioritise kick-off times, things like that, for the overseas audience.
Because we have already seen that with the FA Cup. There are more earlier kick-offs in particular, several at the same time, to appeal to those Asian audiences. Now, currently, only the 12:30 game on a Saturday really appeals to the Asian markets. We've got the 5:30 game, which on a Saturday taken by NBC in the States and their main channel, and actually NBC have contributed to this growth because their value they're paying for the rights has almost trebled to $2.7 billion almost.
Not just NBC as well, Rob. The other big one in this cycle has been Nent, the Scandinavian deal that the Premier League pulled off just at the start of the pandemic. The Premier League is in a league of its own. We've kind of mentioned this before, where analysts talk about the big five leagues. There really isn't. There is one big league, and that's the Premier League. It's a cycle in which Italy, France, and Germany have all seen their rights go down. The only one that's seen any increase is Spain, but it's so far behind the Premier League. You kind of see some of the currents that were one of the significant reasons why some of the big European teams wanted a Super League.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a bit of an issue which is going to surface more and more here, it's always been an issue. But more overseas money means that the big clubs get a higher share, because part of it is merit-based, the way you finish in the table. And there's also the issue of the new Champions League money from the new deals that's going to come in from 2024. That's also going to help the ones who qualify for the Champions League. So that's going to be, the divide is getting bigger.
Because this changed a couple of years ago, where previously the foreign TV revenue was split equally amongst the 20 clubs, but now it is weighted depending on league positions. And in terms of the calculations, how we see things working out from next season, Premier League champions next season will get £176 million compared to just £153 million, very likely for Manchester City, the way things are looking. and the team that finishes bottom will be relegated with £106 million compared to £96 million now, and of course there's various parachute payments too. So in total, £10.5 billion over 3 years compared to £9.2 billion now. It includes some commercial deals worth £120 million too, and the Premier League are still looking to do an NFT deal as well.
The other striking part, you mentioned there that the last team gets more than £100 million. That's so significant. I'll give you an example. Like a team in Serie A, middle-sized team, top half of the table, so Fiorentina, they generate 70 million euros from all of their activities. And we're saying that the team that's going to come last in the Premier League is going to get £100+ million just from the TV. And that just shows you, I guess, what an advantage when it comes to the transfer market, when it comes to getting the best talent the Premier League will have for years to come. I really wonder what the European football landscape is going to look like at the end of this TV deal.
Particularly as it means teams in a country like France chase for Champions League places might actually see their players getting more attractive deals from the bottom end of the Premier League. We're also seeing now Newcastle strengthening in the January transfer window to try to stay up. And if we just look at one league on the continent, the Bundesliga earns €200 million a year in overseas TV rights. That's less than a tenth of what the Premier League makes.
The National Football League, the NFL in America, we talked about the enormous 10-year, $100 billion domestic TV deal. It really is a local product for local people because its overseas TV deal is worth less than $10 million.
Amazing.
It seems a lot of clubs are pretty pleased with themselves, although it's always difficult to get any of them to come on to speak to us, particularly even on the pod, leaving the meeting.
It's always a bit of a challenge to get people to speak to you. I think they're always worried about what the other club officials will think if they see them talking to journalists. But some people are happy to just have a chat, don't want to speak on the record. Other people completely blank you, like the Spurs chairman Daniel Levy. Like I asked about a report that Spurs were going to bid to host the Super Bowl in 2026, and he just smiled at me in the way he does and went, "No comment, no comment."
Refused to rule out. But the Premier League very hospitable to us as we encamped in the central London hotel lobby, and they even opened the doors of the meeting room for us to go in. We couldn't quite get a glimpse of the notes that might have been left on the table. I think someone might have tried to, and someone was whisked away. But we did get to finish off the buffet of food that was left there to ensure no food wastage.
Absolutely, waste not, want not, and absolutely the right thing to do. Sort of a group of hungry journalists, and very nice too. I think you had too many cheesecakes though, Tarek.
No comment, Martin.
But it's been a really busy week again, and you've been out and about a bit, Rob. I think you were in Manchester.
Yeah, I was at the premiere of Wayne Rooney's film. Actually, the highlight there surely was arriving on the blue carpet and being told by an Amazon PR that on the way up to the event he'd been listening to last week's pod. So it's good to know that they've got the right content. They're not listening to any Amazon content. Although, of course, we are actually available on Audible as well to get your pods from there to subscribe to us.
Was it awkward at all? Because that documentary, Rooney, really revealed a lot about himself. He was there with his wife, Colleen, and they talked about their marriage, which has been well documented in the UK press over the last 10 years, 20 years. How was it being there, knowing they were there as well?
Yeah, so beforehand, a few of us journalists were in the bar with Wayne Rooney. Colleen was there, a few of the current Manchester United players, like Harry Maguire, some former players, Richard Arnold, the newly appointed chief executive of Manchester United as well, David Gill, one of his predecessors, and then we all filed up to the cinema to watch the film for the first time, and Wayne is there, sitting with Colleen and their families as well, and it got me thinking as the film was going on, and it's really candid and opens up about his life, and the fact they are seen in the film talking about his marital transgressions and also earlier encounters as well with women when he was seeing Colleen as a young player, and I'm thinking, this is on the big screen, and they're sitting there, fortunately in a darkened cinema, having to watch not only the positive things about their life playing out, but also the negatives, and having to talk about keeping their marriage alive.
Colleen's been in the news for another reason as well. The famous Wagatha Christie case has finally come to court, Martin.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows this is the libel case where Rebecca Vardy is suing Colleen Rooney for alleging that she was leaking stories to the Sun newspaper. It's just amazing how much this has cost. It's £500 a minute. That's the libel bill.
Some lawyers earning more than Premier League footballers, perhaps even. And of course, this all comes down to the fact that Colleen Rooney did suspect that stories about her were being leaked, so she posted some fake ones on her Instagram stories, and you can hide who actually views your stories. So eventually she set it to, I think, just a couple of people or even just Colleen to see actually who was viewing it, and her very cleverly worded statement at the time said it was Rebecca Vardy's account that seems to be behind the leak. So obviously it all hinges on perhaps who had access to the Instagram account to view these and were anything's past the Sun. And there's been various evidence as well already heard about Rebecca Vardy's dealings with the Sun over potential leaks of stories.
Kind of get a real window into the lives of some of these people in the relationship with the media. I must say, some of it's quite tawdry. But the thing that struck me and stood out for me was attempts by Colleen Rooney's lawyers to access emails and WhatsApp messages belonging to Rebecca Vardy, her staff, and it reminded us of something we'd seen before, Martin.
One of the things was the Rebecca Vardy's agent, Caroline Watt, according to the court case, she told them that her phone had been dropped into the North Sea, which is very inconvenient or convenient, depending on your point of view. And it reminded us of the inquiry by FIFA by Michael Garcia, the American attorney into World Cup bidding, where the Russia 2018 computer files suddenly became unavailable because they'd all been destroyed.
And they also decided to get rid of their computers because they didn't need them anymore, didn't they, after the bid, even though they won and they had a World Cup to prepare for in 2018.
That Russian bid obviously was very efficient. They didn't buy new computers knowing that the bid was a very short-lived project, so they rented them and then handed it back. And, and before Michael Garcia could get his hands on those hard disks, the computers had been destroyed.
Yeah, talking of Russian bidding, there may be another one because we learned this week that, as we've sort of trailed fairly heavily on this podcast before, that there's going to be a joint British bid for Euro 2028, not the World Cup 2030, and probably the only likely rival, if there is, in fact, will be anyone, is Russia.
Yeah, as first discussed on the pod at the start of January, England deciding not to go for the 2030 World Cup with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and Ireland as part of that joint bid. We heard from Mark Bullingham earlier in the week, along with the other British Isles chief executives, and it was clear from what they were saying that the uncertainty over the future of the World Cup played into the decision because they're all against biennial World Cups, so it's very hard for them to be opposing that big Gianni Infantino project, while at the same time saying, Gianni, could you get everyone to back and give us the World Cup for the first time since '66 in England's case, and for the others for the first time?
Yeah, also, it speaks to me to the current UEFA leadership not wanting bidding contests among their own members, either for the Euros and certainly for the World Cup. It's a shoo-in now that Portugal and Spain, and maybe with the support of Morocco or another regional bidder, will go for the 2030 World Cup. And if I was a betting man, I'd say the field is open for Britain, whether Russia show up or not for the Euros. I wonder if some of the Russian idea of bidding is just to wind the UK up, because they've been enjoying it, haven't they?
Well, yeah, and technically they are still banned from bidding for global events at the moment under the terms of their doping punishment.
Yeah, well, I don't think that doesn't cover the Euros, does it? So they can do that. Yeah. Interesting, too, actually, that the FA chairwoman, Debbie Hewitt, told us that they'd been to Abu Dhabi on a 24-hour quick trip just to tell Gianni Infantino in person that they weren't going to bid for the World Cup. And he said, shame, it could have been your day, but actually I don't think it would have been.
Yeah, absolutely no indications from the FIFA world that they were encouraging a British bid at Ireland at all, and things pointing quite strongly towards Spain and Portugal going for that. On the Euros too, the fact we had an announcement from Italy withdrawing from the 28 contest to focus on 2032 for the Euros because they're doing the voting at the same time. So that immediately saw one possible opponent stepping aside, maybe Turkey still a potential entrant?
Yeah, I think they might be persuaded to take something else because I mean, UEFA can offer other things. But with the UEFA have this very close relationship now with South America with CONMEBOL. What do you think about a sort of Spain, Portugal, Uruguay thing tying in with a centenary?
Yeah, I definitely think that makes a lot of sense. And also, Gianni Infantino has kind of promoted cross-regional bids, and it's a 48-team World Cup. Let's not forget, there's not a lot of places that can pull this off. I can't imagine anywhere really in South America being able to do it. The costs associated with it, and it is the centenary of the World Cup. You can imagine one group or the opening game in Montevideo would be a great start to the tournament.
Or even perhaps a joint South America-Africa bid, because I had a chance to speak to Patrice Motsepe, the Confederation of African Football president, in the last week and asked him about bidding for 2030. He wants an African bid, but we also talked about cross-confederation bidding too. This is what Patrice Motsepe had to say.
I've had many people talk about certain countries in Africa wanting to host the World Cup. And of course, I will have to take a position based on the decision that's taken by CAF. And there's some interesting discussions and exciting discussions taking place. We'll see, I think, at the right time. Do I believe that an intercontinental hosting of the World Cup could be something for the future? For me, that sounds exciting. Can you imagine if, let me give you a bad example. If South Africa and Brazil in the past were to host the World Cup together, exciting. Or London, I don't know, the United Kingdom and I don't know, any of the countries that are not far from it in Africa. So, Rob, there will be discussions that takes place within Africa at the right time. And we will obviously lobby for an African country. But of course, we recognize that the country that will be part of that will then have the huge commitment to make sure that they've got world-class infrastructure.
I think it was just theoretical there when he's suggesting a joint South Africa-Brazil bid, but we've seen stranger things.
Absolutely no chance. I'll bet my house on that.
There is this lingering idea of Morocco being an African representative and perhaps tying up with Spain somehow. Certainly the Spanish, let it be known that's been suggested to them.
Obviously, they're upgraded various stadiums in Spain. The Bernabeu has been rebuilding throughout the pandemic. The Camp Nou has got a big redevelopment project in the works, but the chief executive of Barcelona has resigned this week. He'd only been in the job 7 months.
Ferran Reverter, media businessman, joined up with the new president, Joan Laporta, who's returned for another term, and the Barcelona circus continues. Yes, they've been signing players to improve that squad, signings that some of us have been struggling to understand given the vast amounts of debt and the losses at that club, but they need to remain competitive. They need to try and get back into the Champions League. But it's such a sad story, the demise of Barcelona. It's kind of an institutional embarrassment when it was an institution known for its excellence not that long ago. And perhaps some more developments on that financial side to come, Rob.
Yes, because Barcelona are said to be in the mix of signing Spotify as a sponsor, potentially naming rights deal with the Nou Camp, as we mentioned on last week's show, and this resignation has been linked to that Spotify deal as well. Do we think this is more on the moral grounds, on actually getting into bed with a sponsor for the naming rights, or is it opposing things more generally?
No, I think it's about respect for the office of the CEO. The terms of the deal as agreed were suddenly changed. It was reported at the last minute. The chief executive, Ferran Reverter, we mentioned, wasn't a supporter of this, and he appears completely overruled. And he'd already had misgivings of the way the club was run. Let's not forget, this is it's a popularity contest as much as anything running Barcelona. It's a political organisation, and Joan Laporta is the president. So if you are the CEO, you kind of aren't in a very powerful place in an institution like that.
We talked about Barcelona, of course. They lost all their power at the European Club Association in the last year, and at a time when the ECA has gained even more power, and that's been reinforced in the last week or so with the new UEFA TV rights in terms of how they've marketed that and the control the clubs do get. The fact UEFA have commissioned team marketing, their existing partner, and Relevant Sports in the US to go out to market and sell Champions League rights.
Yeah, Tarek mentioned this last week that he'd reported on it, but it's €5 billion a year, up from 3.6. Another, as we were saying before, another huge increase in money and going to go to the big clubs mainly. Nasser El Khalifi, the chairman of the European Club Association, president of PSG, he wrote a letter to all the clubs saying this is a tectonic shift effectively in the power of the clubs. They're going to be calling the shots now. Interesting, though, his actual position, of course.
Yeah, it's a really curious role. We have to mention some of the other jobs he has. He's also president or chairman of beIN Media Group, perhaps the biggest buyer of sports rights in the world, and he also sits on the UEFA Exco. There's so many hats. He'll need 2 hat stands for all of those, Martin. But what I found kind of interesting and a bit concerning, perhaps, is this, that he's in the room listening to offers for the club competition tender, while also eventually going to be the guy who buys them. So he's going to see the projections, the upper ceilings, and then he's going to bid for the rights. Some people will say, well, that's the way it is, and it means he'll go to the maximum price. But I just find that very odd that he'll have all of the information when there's a tender for the rights. If there is a rival to be in, he'll have all the information.
And this was something the La Liga president Javier Tebas complained about when Nasser Khalifa originally joined the UEFA Exco a few years ago. The fact these conflicts of interest that are out there in the open, but at the same time, UEFA is looking to be in to be a key broadcast partner in terms of revenue.
Yeah, maybe he just thinks, well, they've got such limitless money, that it doesn't really matter how much they pay, just as long as they get the rights.
For all we talk about power, wealth and money on this pod, it's interesting how often it's the completely unexpected scandals that can come up on clubs and become huge global issues, and they're often ill-prepared in terms of the fallout. And the Premier League can be such an unpredictable world the best of times, but I think the Kurt Zouma story that developed this week is just one out of nowhere completely. The fact is, he was filmed by his brother kicking his pet cat in around the kitchen, and that angry response was not only filmed by his brother but then posted on social media, and of course then it made its way into the media and became front page news and an example of how not to handle crisis management perhaps by West Ham.
West Ham made a big mistake by actually not announcing what they were going to fine him at the time, and also the fact that they weren't going to he was actually picked for the match that evening, and it caused absolute furore. People who are not even interested in football, celebrities criticising them, and I think if they dealt with it there and then on the day, it would have been done. But now they've lost a couple of sponsors. The club, he's lost his boot deal, and it's not just the fact that Britain is a nation of animal lovers, Tarek. It's France too.
No one's going to sit here and defend a guy attacking a cat. But I think there's a question of proportion as well in some of the reaction here, especially given some of the unsavoury incidents that have happened in football over the years. We had Michael Antonio, one of his teammates, this week, talk about incidents of racism by players, etc. He says, has anyone ever been banned or had their career threatened because of making racist comments? No, but one of the other thing that struck me are, there's Premier League teams that we know have continued picking players who faced multiple rape allegations, for example, for several months. And another one, Adam Johnson's a classic one a few years ago. He's now a convicted paedophile, but until his trial took place, he continued to be picked by his former club, Sunderland, I think, at the time. Now, we don't want to do whataboutery, but this is what Michael Antonio talked about with racism, and I think women's rights campaigners have spoken about this as well on social media and elsewhere. Yes, this story seems to have captured the headlines and captured the mood of the nation, and in a way that all these other incidents, unsavoury incidents, haven't.
I don't think West Ham really anticipated just how this was going to unfold. It wasn't just a football issue, and some of the public actually expecting to see a response, and for Kurt Zouma not to be playing.
Rob, kicking a cat or doing anything of that nature to a pet or any other animal is outrageous. But his teammates have said that there have been people calling him out, and for his career to end, and that's the point of proportion. And I think we can hear from Michael Antonio.
Yeah, this is what he had to say outside West Ham's training ground.
What should it be, a harsher punishment for Zuma for what he did? What do you think?
I've got a question for you.
You go for it.
So, do you think what he's done is worse than racism?
I mean, it's totally different. It's two different things, isn't it? You're not comparing
I'm not condoning a thing that he's done.
Sure.
I don't agree with what he's done at all.
Sure.
But there's people that's convicted, been caught for racism, and has played football afterwards. They got punished, they got 8 game punishment or something like that. But people are now calling for people to be sacked, for them to lose their livelihood. I've just got to ask this question to everyone out there, is what he's done worse than what the people have done that are convicted for racism?
I really do understand his point, and I think it's an important one and something that should be borne in mind. But I also understand why people react when they see a completely innocent, defenceless animal being mistreated.
And this isn't a football thing. I mean, some people's linking it to the conduct of footballers, but it's so rare. This is the first time we're talking about this. Shows this is actually limited to just an absolutely abhorrent act by not only Kurt Zouma, and also his brother Johan, who filmed it. He's now been suspended by Dagenham and Redbridge, his club. The fact he thought this was something to share, I don't know, as a joke, just seems absolutely shocking. And, Adidas have dropped Kurt Zouma as a sponsor, West Ham sponsors speaking out too, and there was no one from West Ham at the Premier League meeting that we've been at.
No, Karen Brady, Baroness Brady, chose to dial in remotely, and not surprising, I think. It's probably the only one of these things that she's not been at, that's in my memory anyway.
West Ham becoming global news in the way they would not expect to or hope to when they're challenging for Champions League place. Instead, they've been sharing space really globally with the Winter Olympics in Beijing, which are ending their first week, and a games unfolding as we expect under that cloud of controversy over the IOC's complicity with a country accused of genocide, which they've been doing their best to skirt around, and of course the IOC grappling with the Peng Shuai issue that's been hanging over them for a few months, the Chinese tennis star who spoke out in November about sexual assault she alleges by a senior member of the Communist Party. And this week we did hear from Peng Shuai at the Olympics in an interview with L'Equipe, but an interview that sort of raised more questions than answers just about how it was conducted and whether this really is Peng Shuai herself saying what she thinks, because she recanted her previous statement she made on social media.
Yeah, even Mark von Trothe, one of the journalists who interviewed Peng Shuai, said he couldn't hand on heart say that she's free at all. There was a minder stroke translator there. They're still in China under the guidance of the Chinese Olympic Committee. They had to submit questions beforehand as well. Rob, the other thing is the IOC's role in this again. We talked about them previously. While the WTA and anyone else couldn't get in touch with Peng Shuai, the IOC has for several months. Thomas Bach, the IOC president, has had these meetings that have not been open. And it's been more of the same at the Olympics. Thomas Bach had his dinner with Peng Shuai, and she then appeared at all these various events. There was that hashtag, "Where is Peng Shuai?" when she was missing. I think for this week, there might as well have been one, "Where isn't Peng Shuai?" Because at various events where there's photographs and cameramen, there she is, but not really talking to the press.
And we did hear from the WTA again, Steve Simon, their chairman, responding to that interview, saying that, it was good to see her at the Olympics, and she has certainly been very visible around events. But he said her recent in-person interview does not alleviate any of our concerns about her initial post from November the 2nd. To reiterate our view, Peng took a bold step in publicly coming forth with the accusation that she was sexually assaulted by a senior Chinese government leader. As we would do with any of our players globally, we have called for a formal investigation into the allegations, and the statement says actually that they still would welcome a meeting with Peng Shuai to discuss her situation.
Yeah, why can't the Chinese just let her do an interview without anybody there, without any minders, let her speak in English, and it's sickening. It really is. The other big news, though, regarding the Olympics, doping case involving the 15-year-old skater Kamila Valieva.
And at the outset, this case was reported initially by Russian media, but it raises questions. Actually, being 15 years old, she has the right to some sort of privacy under the World Anti-Doping Agency too, being a minor.
Yeah, that's right, Rob. She has a so-called protected status because she's a minor. And look, let's talk about that for a second as well. She's 15. The idea that a 15-year-old is doping, if she has indeed, that is kind of shocking and sad as well, that someone saw fit to provide performance-enhancing drugs to someone so young. And also, it's the Russians again, isn't it? Don't forget the Russians are banned. There isn't a team called Russia at these Olympics. This is the last ban for that massive doping program that was uncovered in 2015. This team is known as the ROC, or the Russian Olympic Committee, through this.
Well, no, they shouldn't be known as all the Russian Olympic Committee. They should only be referred to as the ROC on broadcast without Russia, but too often the full version is used.
Yeah, well, in fact, this entire ban, it seems a bit of a farce. It's like a bit of a Swiss cheese. There's holes crosses. More than 200 Russian athletes competing at these games. The uniform looks very Russian for all intents and purposes. Russia haven't really been banned from the Olympics, have they?
No, they haven't. I mean, talking about children being doped. I mean, it's not the first time in sport. I mean, if you go back to the East Germans, I mean, it was absolutely rife for teenage girls, especially. And in this case, the reports coming out of Russia that it's an angina drug, and that's we if you remember with the meldonium, that was the drug which led to the suspension of Maria Sharapova, the former Wimbledon champion, the tennis player. And if there's a similar drug which has also now been banned, and this teenager took it inadvertently, or was given it by a coach, then that's an absolute tragedy.
The other tragedy is she had a remarkable performance on the ice on Monday. It's for the first time in history, a woman landed a quad, which is a type of jump. She managed to complete not just once but twice. It's a quadruple jump. It's never happened before, and it was part of the team event. And Russia had won the gold medal. They were even given the commemorative panda bears as well at the end of that. And the first people knew was when the medal ceremony was delayed for a so-called legal issue. It's now been 2 days, will be 3 days, even as we record this, and there is no clarity. Rob, the other thing is the IOC, again, delaying, obfuscation, there's been press conferences and nothing coming out. Obviously, the Olympics last just 2 weeks, and we've seen this playbook before. They take so long to transmit any information, and by the time it's finished, no one will care anymore.
The Olympics does unfold in a way where there's a daily press conference, unlike many sports, so there is an ability to throw questions generally at Mark Adams, the IOC spokesman, every day. And there he is having to face the cameras and say something or nothing, in this case saying we've seen all sorts of speculation overnight and not really adding to it because it was an ongoing legal case. But it is quite rare in sport that media get the opportunity to throw questions at the key leadership, or at least spokespeople from the leadership, even if they're not saying anything. And in this case, the substance we're talking about is tromezenidine. It's a metabolic agent. It can prevent angina attacks and treat vertigo. So will she be able to find a reason why she's been taking it? Because we don't often see doping cases in skating, because it's not about muscle building in any way. But there have been examples in the past about taking substances to keep weight down, for instance?
Just on Mark Adams, we've known for years. He has developed this uncanny ability. I would say he's the master class in filibustering. He can speak for a really long time without saying anything. And talking to people who are in Beijing for the press conference, there's also this other weird dynamic there. When a Chinese journalist gets on the mic, the questions are about how successful everything is, about how great the Olympics are, and then that will be interspersed with these sort of searching questions from the Western media. It just shows the kind of stark difference in the media environment in these two, kind of between China and the Western media.
Do you think doping is going to become a thing in esports? Because we know that the Commonwealth Games is going to have esports in this summer in Birmingham. What do you think about that? I have to say I'm not a big fan.
Well, it's something I looked into actually 4 years ago when the E-World Cup final was in London, and it was really the first esports events I'd been to. And actually in 2017, I went to my first esports events. It was the E-World Cup final in London, then it was actually the FIFA Interactive World Cup. And it was when there was betting involved in it, and also FIFA raised the prize money to $200,000. And when I was there, I was sort of wondering, well, actually, does that mean they need to start doing integrity checks and things like checking for doping? Because there's certainly now a financial benefit to be gained. And then by a year later, in 2018, well, it was the first time they started doing drug testing. And actually, it was one of the Saudi Arabian players who said to me he started to feel like a superstar because he was being tested just like the top players were. But of course, there is a benefit in esports because it's all about endurance and concentration for those long periods in darkened rooms sitting in front of the console.
On the subject of esports, Rob, I prefer not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the major problems that they're going to face is probably like the competitors having like too many burgers and Slurpees, that sort of thing. I mean, they can overdose on those any problem. No, but seriously, I'm with people like Sharon Davis. It's not a sport. It shouldn't be there. Why not? Let's have Cluedo at the Commonwealth Games with Professor Plum in the conservatory with the lead piping.
I mean, we've also got esports making their debut at the Asian Games this year, and they're not only playing the FIFA game but also League of Legends too. And it was actually straight after Paris won the rights for the 2024 Olympics. I was with the president of the bid, who now is running the games, Tony Esange, and he was actually in central London, and I brought up the prospect of esports in the games, and he was actually quite keen on it. It never came to fruition. It is about balancing new audiences, isn't it? We can't neglect the fact that for so many youngsters, they are engaged in esports. This is their way of being in competitive fields, and for many during the pandemic, when people were locked away at homes, they couldn't go out and play sport. Esports was a way not only of still engaging with friends and playing games and having that social interaction, but it's not physical. They're not actually, there's no exercise apart from your thumbs.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a sport, it's a game. It's just fine, it's great, whatever they are, they're fine. They shouldn't be part of a major international sporting event.
I mean, some sports are more suited to esports. I was this week at the Red Bull factory in Milton Keynes, and during lockdown, the Formula 1 drivers were actually playing the esports version of F1, and it didn't actually look that dissimilar to Formula 1 itself, because of course we don't see the drivers' faces, and you watch the TV products and it's just a load of cars going around, and it's pretty high quality.
But is the outcome contrived as well?
Yeah, Martin, who knows? I mean, we're heading into this very interesting moment. In the next few weeks, we're going to find out the results of that long-awaited FIA investigation into how the race director Michael Massey, in that controversial last lap at the last Grand Prix, basically changed the rules and essentially handed the World Championship to Max Verstappen.
Yeah, and the reason why I was at Red Bull was to see the team principal, Christian Horner, and he does recognise a need to make the rules clearer. Obviously delighted still to have his guy as world champion, and the fact Verstappen winning on the final lap of the final race of the season probably just reinforces the sort of appeal of the sport that would seem lacking a few years ago. And one of the reasons I was with Christian Horner was to talk about the new sponsorship deal, which is with Oracle, and it's been put anywhere up to the region of $500 million over 5 years, it seems. And they've got the title sponsorship, and all they kept on talking about, whether it was Christian Horner or the Oracle representative I was interviewing too, was about Drive to Survive and how that sort of created this new appeal. And we talk about whether the outcome was contrived in some way. Well, certainly that will be a dramatic episode when it comes to it. That will only increase the appeal of the sport. And it was another bit of footage this week from the end of the season that has added a new bit of intrigue over just what orders were given.
I think this came out at the time, but I think it was slightly overshadowed by everything that was happening. But yeah, just some more instructions that were sort of appeared to be given by Red Bull to the to Michael Massey. Talking on this, I think there's just finishing up quite an amusing incident involving Christian Horner this week. There was the Autosport Awards, and in the auction for a tour of the Mercedes factory, he outbid everybody, paid £4,000 for a tour of the factory. He's going to go along with three teammates to get an inside view into his rivals.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to Christian Horner about this. He certainly saw it as very much a charitable thing, but looking forward to swaggering around their rival's factory, definitely for sure. And it's looking exciting at the start of the new season too. Perhaps we could auction off a live viewing of this, because actually next door to the helpful hotel we've come into to record this pod is actually a theatre, a big queue that he did actually try to say to you it was a surprise live stage show and we're about to walk on stage.
Well, if we don't auction off a live appearance, we can auction off an NFT.
Yeah, that was the other thing we got from the Premier League meeting today. They are still going to do an NFT. You get a digital token of something from the Premier League. Actually, they've reclaimed the Premier League trophy, haven't they, from someone?
Yeah, quite amusingly. The Premier League finally have wrestled their digital trophy back from John Terry. So his new ape NFT business is now shorn of that shiny trophy.
Yeah, he's had to change his Twitter profile pic, which was one of his NFT apes with the Premier League trophy. He's had to change it, so he's now just a picture of himself holding the actual Premier League trophy, not a digital one.
Well, this is the actual podcast coming to an end, all in person here, fresh from the Premier League meeting, from me, Rob Harris, from Martin Ziegler and Tarek Panja.
Yeah, great stuff, guys. Good to see you in person. And here's to another busy week.
Martin, you better hurry. You're going to miss your train.
And everyone, keep your views coming into us at Sport Unlocked on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. Oh, and there are still those awards to vote for as well too. You can find the link on our Twitter feed at Sport Unlocked. But for now, thank you for listening and enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead. Good. Bye for now.